Welcome back to Radio Omnicor, episode 38. Today's guest is Dr. Hilton Rudnick, and it's a real interesting journey about his career. There's some light moments, some surprising facts about him that possibly you don't know. And a couple of the staff at Omnicor got together and presented him with some tough questions. And we really hope you enjoyed the session, getting to know Dr. Rudnick better, and have a great listen. Welcome to the studio. Today we are very excited to host Dr. Hilton Rudnick, our MD and the interviewee chair. He's our guest, and I had to fill that co-host spot, and I managed to convince Sully to come and join us. So welcome, Sully. Welcome, Hilton.
Thank you, Colleen. Happy
Thank
to be
you.
here.
It's great to be here. So looking forward to sharing with you. I'm flattered that I was invited as a guest. I don't really feel that I have great wisdom to share, but I'm very happy to just see what you're interested in hearing about me.
Let's kick it off then, Hilton, maybe just high level, people who don't know you. What's a nice sort of overview intro about Dr. Hilton Rudnick?
I think I've had an interesting career, and I think I've had an interesting life, and like a lot of things, some of it's just been lucky, a lot of it hasn't been planned, some of it's just been happenstance, and the right things fell into place at the right time. So the journey I had was that when I finished school, I did at the time there was a technicon, and I did a diploma. At the time it was called electronic data processing, which was really the equivalent of computer science, but at a technicon level. And I spent 2 years, I think it was, learning how to code. I was a COBOL programmer. And subsequent to that, I went into the corporate world. I went to a company called Prudential Insurance, and I was a COBOL programmer for them. And I soon realized, almost as soon as I started, that although coding was a lot of fun, I liked that it was very clear, I didn't identify with the role, and I started doing a BA through UNISA, and I chose, for no particular reason, English and psychology, just because I had to choose something. And so while I was working, and I spent 10 years as in a different corporate environments, coding, languages, we worked, it wasn't only COBOL, we did some other stuff as well. And all the time, I also then I got through a BA, and then I did an honors. And at some point, everything converged, and I had to make really some kind of choice about my life. And I became a psychologist. So I was lucky enough to get into a master's course. And that was really, I suppose, a turning point for me in marrying the worlds of digital technology. And I'm most proud to be a psychologist. I just love what psychology stands for. I love psychological science. I love human behavior, understanding it. And I was a therapist. So, also I spent 10 years really as an academic working at the university, training therapists. And also we had our own practice on the side, and it was a small practice. So, once a week I had a real hands-on practical experience doing psychotherapy. So a lot of different things that kind of converged. And eventually when I left academia and joined Omnicor, I got into, I guess, a hardcore business environment where we were, in the P&L and just, trying to learn how to make a living in a very, very competitive environment. And, so I've been at Omnicor now probably, I think, 12 years. And in some way I've managed to marry the world of psychological science and the world of really academia in some way. I'm very interested in good, robust science that backs our products, and the worlds of computers and the world of psychology mesh in some kind of way. And our business really represents that. We're a digital company in a very fluffy world, and the world of psychometrics and organizational developments is very, very fluffy. And we try and make good sense of, and we try and make a good contribution in having good science and good psychology with good digital technology. So that was more than a 2-minute introduction. You're welcome to edit that down a bit, but I hope that it gives you some insight into my journey.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think having known you all this time, Hilton, your journey is one that I definitely found interesting. Certainly starting off as a programmer or as a COBOL coder, as you said, and then going into something like psychology, but now kind of being the MD of a company that does both together. So kind of digitizing that psychological organizational development space. I think it was brilliantly put together. But I think your journey inside of Omnicor was also one that kind of intrigues me. Seeing off where you started. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, you started off as a report writer within the business.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. So when I was looking around to get out of academia, there was an advert in the paper that was looking for psychometrists, and I had a PhD, so I thought, well, I could probably do psychometry. And I phoned up Omnicor, and someone answered, and I said, you've advertised for a job, and they asked me about my qualifications, and I said I've got a PhD, and I think that was probably more than most of the psychometrists they were hiring at the time. So she said, well, you better talk to my boss. And I met the owner of Omnicor. His name was James. And, James was very instrumental in my life in kind of just shaping my understanding of the world of business. And, in terms of leadership, I just learned a lot from him. So I joined Omnicor coming into that world, and really, didn't know, I was probably, if anything, very suspicious of psychometrics and suspicious of the kind of just anything that reduces human beings to transactional elements and very static numbers and, profiles and those kind of things. And I'd always felt that humans were so much more than that. And it, in a way, was a bit of an affront to the way that I saw the world. But, I think it's been an asset for me to be skeptical about things like assessments, because they can be used in, I think, a misinformed way. And I think that, there are kind of life and death decisions that are made with them, and people getting jobs or not getting jobs. So I can't remember what your question was, but I feel I might have answered a part of it.
You have answered a part of it. I said your journey within Omnicor. I mean, starting off, like you said, from that phone call to becoming the MD of the company.
So when I joined Omnicor, I joined it in the Omnicor had lots of different divisions. They did training and other stuff, and I joined in the kind of psychometric world, and as the head of the assessments. So it was probably a brave move on James's part to put me into that role, because I hadn't gone through the normal journey of being a junior psychometrist, and then suddenly I was heading an area full of people who were experienced in it, and that probably ruffled a few feathers in that world at the time. But I think I've always been able to get on with people, and I also don't have like a really big need to be the boss. So very happy to let the people around me take responsibility for what they're doing and let them just get on with it. And, I'm around to kind of help shape the general direction. But I think Omnicor, was already a successful assessment business. And, I think the one thing I saw when I came in there, just that it wasn't a particularly scalable business in the way it was going at the time. So I think they were doing very, very good work, and there was lots of integrity in the work that they were doing, but it was very high touch. And, almost by luck, I, decided and spoke to James. I said, shouldn't we start looking at something that just automates the very hard manual work that people had to do? So you had very qualified people who were spending a lot of time just doing admin, writing reports, and they finish one report and there's another one to write, and they all had postgraduate degrees. And we started very slowly. We brought in a guy, an outside person, who his name was Malcolm. Malcolm was a legend in South African psychometrics, but he was also a coder. And we kind of scoped out an initial system just to help with the report writing and automate some of that. And so that was, I think, the start. Omnicor did already have at least one digital system, and this was the start of really building something else for them in terms of automating the assessment process. And I think if we look at Rollfit today, it's a complete, it's a very comprehensive system, best of breed. I think it's the best system in the world. There might, it's definitely for me the best system in South Africa in what it does, and because we've just been building it ever since, and every month it grows, and it's a better system.
So it's interesting, Hilton, and I think a big shout out to James Ashton and Kathy Farlam, who are the founders of the business. And if you do want to find out a bit more about James's journey, you must listen to episode 8 earlier on in the podcast. For this podcast today, Hilton, what we did was we asked everyone in the company what questions they would want to ask you, and we're going to be tagging those people in their questions. So let me start off with Herbert's question. So Herbert works in my team, and he says that, you're such a good leader, and he's wondering, what is it that makes you a good leader? Is it your personality? Is it something that you learned? And then also just what is your definition of a good leader?
Sure. So maybe you must get Herbert to ask easier questions next time. Those are, I think, the world of leadership focus is, I guess those are the big questions. It's almost like, what is the meaning of life kind of questions. And, there's lots of different opinions about it. And I don't know I have the definitive answers. So I definitely don't see myself as a particularly good leader. I try to be a good human being and hope that the leadership stuff just falls into place behind that. I find a lot of leadership in my world, I feel very lucky because the people we employed are just so skilled and so committed and so loyal that there's not a lot of leading that has to happen. They lead themselves, and a lot of it, and I say it to people quite regularly, like I just need to get out of their way and let them do the job. I definitely don't feel as a leader that I have better answers than anyone else. I feel like the people around me have great answers. I feel like if you just give people the space to do their jobs, they do it so well. And, leadership for me is, I guess, trying my best just to look into the future and hold the business together, keep us relevant as a business. But even that, I get so much of that just from the people around me because they drive the strategic direction of their own products and where they're going. So I don't know what a good leader is, Herbert, but I think it's probably aligned to being a good human being, having a lot of empathy, being able to listen to people, and generally just like trying to allow the people around you, and they're good people, just to do their jobs without your interference. So I don't know if that answers it at all or was just a long ramble.
No, I think it does. It gives your kind of viewpoint to that question. So thank you for that. The second question we had was from Obakeng. So Obakeng works in Omnicor in IT, and he does support, interestingly, the role I started out at. And his question was, I would like to know, how does Hilton manage to stay calm at all times? Even when we were at the peak of the pandemic, he called to check up on us and to find out if we were managing. How is he so relaxed?
Yeah, I think, again, I think it taps into the answer I gave earlier is I have just great confidence in the people working around me. Everybody's trying to make this a successful company. And when a crisis hits, everybody steps up a gear and does their best just to make us survive better and flourish as a business. So I'm not someone who panics easily. I prefer to take time to reflect and think about things. I think I am probably a little bit more nervous inside than people ever know about. And I do sometimes find myself lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking, okay, so now how are we going to get through this particular challenge? And there's less and less of that these days, fortunately. So, I think it's a tribute to our business that it's working well. But, the other thing that Oberking asked is, I'm genuinely interested in how people are doing. So, it doesn't take a lot of effort for me to call Oberking and say, what's happening and how's it going? I'm interested in his life. I'm interested in where he lives, or, who his girlfriend is. And so I'm just interested in people. That's, I think, part of being a psychologist. So it's not like it doesn't take a big effort for me to do that. And it's the part of the job that I really like. I'm very fascinated with whoever works at Omnicor and what their stories are.
I think that's also why you enjoy being on the podcast, because you love also just meeting interesting people. Carry on, Silly.
Sorry, I was just going to say that I think also in terms of your leadership style and how you being the MD of the business, and this is me talking as someone who started out here what is it, 10, 11 years ago, newly married, first proper job, having you as the MD. I mean, come down to me, just ask about my life. Why did I get married? But then obviously guiding me, it was that.
Some people would see it as a bit creepy, but I'm glad you didn't.
No, but I think we've developed a really good friendship from that. And I mean, you've guided me through all of these years, starting out from support to where I am now. And I think with the way, with your leadership style and how you leave people to get on, you trust in people, but also then guide when people come to you, has been a massive, in terms of me personally, in my growth, has been massive to me. So I do always appreciate how you go about that, and how you are so interested in people and their lives. So I think from everyone, that's a big thank you.
It's good that you say that, Suli, but I mean, you're an easy person to manage. You get on with your job, you do whatever you have to do, you work late nights if you have to, you've got a great commitment, and you're also just like very politically neutral. There's no baggage with you. So, those are easy people to manage. You just like, it's just, you do it yourself. And I mean, essentially, I think with a lot of the staff at Omnicor, I really believe I have genuine friendships with them and interested in what they're doing. And, I think, again, maybe it's just like the common denominator is we're all human beings. We're all muddling through this earth. We're just trying to hold it together, pay school fees, go to the shops, do those kind of things. And I just have like a great respect for that. Like, I mean, I've always wanted the business to have a very flat hierarchy. I don't really have like a need, and I don't want other people to see that they have power over other people. I want them to see that we're all in this together. And so, part of my leadership philosophy is, let's not have big egos about leadership. Let's get on as people. Let's all just try and make it work as a team.
I think another attribute, it sounds like, as we go through these questions, is just the humility, because you seem to be deferring all the compliments you're getting.
Exactly.
So the next question is from Edmore, and Edmore is one of our senior developers. And he asks, how do you maintain the enthusiasm and optimism in the midst of chaos?
Yeah. So I think optimism is in some way an inherent trait. So, I've always been a little bit unrealistically optimistic. And, sometimes you've just got to make your luck and make it happen. So I don't really feel the chaos. I feel like there's always a way that if we put the right energy into it, we can get through whatever challenge there is. And sometimes that's, just being very honest and, saying where we are and asking everyone for support and just, letting everyone get on with it. And, I suppose that's a theme. But I sometimes feel a little bit alone in the kind of like looking after the finances of the business, and like I worry, about those kind of things. And maybe that worry does just belong with me. But I feel very connected in the support that I have in the business of people doing their jobs and coming to work and doing it. So I feel optimistic because I believe our team can get through any kind of crisis that there is. And maybe one day that'll come back to bite me. Maybe I'll be unrealistically optimistic, but I'd rather work with optimistic people than pessimistic people. I like the kind of can do, let's make it work philosophy rather than let's see all the obstacles up front and figure out how we're going to maneuver around them. I am probably, let's cross that bridge when we come to it, more of a leader than meticulous planning. And, a lot of people would see that as a flaw. And maybe it is. But in my life, we've kind of have managed to overcome every obstacle that we've had. We've never had a month where we haven't paid salaries. We've had lots of, every business has ups and downs, and we've weathered them all. And so I kind of believe in the business, and I believe in the people in the business.
I think just to your point around meticulous planning and just your optimism, and even just marry back to your leadership style, no matter how much we would have wanted to plan, we're going to never plan for 2020, right? And everyone knows
Completely.
it.
Yeah.
But I think you're trusting in people, and the way you go about managing but just the business allowed Omnicor to pivot really quickly. I think the whole work from home, people working during lockdown, going about making sure everyone has the ability to be connected, has the ability to carry on working. But again, everyone knew how much trust you place in them. That allowed them to just pick up and carry on like nothing's happened, whether we're in the office or whether I'm sitting currently in my bedroom and having a meeting. It allowed me to carry on the same way because, like you said, you trust everyone to wake up, get to work, and carry on with it. And I think that's what we all did. So no matter how much we would have wanted to plan for something, I think just your trust in us allowed us to carry on with the business in that manner.
Yes, thanks. Yeah, I think it did. I think it does. I think when you trust people, they live up to that trust. I mean, I think it's very rare in my life where I've seen the opposite. Where you trust people and they just see that as an opportunity to exploit it. It's so rare that happens.
Our next question is from Amy. So
Amy.
Yes, so Amy says, I would want to know from Hilton, what has been your secret to success?
Is that the end of the question?
That's the end of the question.
Or is that the preamble to
no,
the
no,
longer
no,
question?
that's the end of the question. She wants to know your secrets.
That's the end of the question. Yeah. Sure. It's another meaning of life question. So first of all, I mean, success for me is like totally work in progress. So, I feel successful in that for many years, this business has done what it's promised to do, and it's, kept given people careers and a life, and they've sent their children to school and got married, and, whatever, like a lot has happened around this business that I think has been very successful. I think, to answer Amy's question, honestly, it feels a bit like I'm repeating myself, but it's not my success. The success of the business really belongs to everybody. It belongs to, all the people who work just long hours and who just do what they have to do. So, I think I don't see myself as a particularly driven person. I went and studied, and I was interested in things. I wasn't studying because I wanted status. I did psychology because I was interested in human beings, and I was just like fortunate that landed up being a career. I don't think it's the easiest profession. There's not like companies lining up to employ psychologists, I don't think, as like they would accountants and engineers. So, I feel lucky in the things that I've done. And, some of it, if I look back at there probably is some plan that fell into place that was almost unconscious from my point of view. But I don't have a secret, Amy. I mean, I think, it's been a combination of being in the right place at the right time and believing in the people around me and believing in the business and, some blind luck in just making it work and a convergence of things that make it, I feel very lucky that my life has worked this way. I feel, I'm now probably in my end game in some way. I'm probably in my last 10 years of work. And it's just, I feel very fortunate that it's worked out the way I don't feel like I've driven it. I haven't like steered the ship and made like crucial decisions that have gone my way. I feel we've just kind of worked as a team to make it all happen. So I don't have a secret for you, Amy. And I think if you find the secret, I would love for you to come share it with me.
Okay. So our next question is from Keegan. He's one of our psychometrists. And he says, how does Hilton cope with the pressure of being an MD?
Yeah, I feel the pressure in some ways. We want to make a profit every month, and I feel the pressure in just balancing the resources and the income versus output and the profit and loss and all those kind of things. I feel the pressure. But it's not something that I'm agonizing about every day. It's something that comes up every now and again. We had many months where I just didn't have to worry about it, where, we were on a good roll. I think COVID has no doubt been a setback.
Certainly.
It's definitely, the whole economy of South Africa has become more contained. Some of our great blue chip clients have found themselves with less discretionary spend to send to our way, and they've shut down some of the work that would have been a given in the past. So the truth, Keegan, is that I feel some pressure, but it's not pressure that I agonize over or that wears me down. It's pressure that I think we all share as a business. And I think probably, Keegan, you may have more pressure in my life. You have different deadlines to me. You have things that have to go out on a particular day. I don't have a lot of that stuff. I have some of it, but I don't have a lot of it. So the pressure I feel is keeping the business alive for the next 5 to 10 years. And what do we have to put in place? We want to expand as a business. There's opportunities in this country, outside of this country. There's new products we should probably be thinking of. I've always got to look at, are we getting stale in the way we do things, and should we bring new energy to them? But those are innovative, nice thoughts for me. They're not pressure thoughts. They kind of, it's like when you're building something, how to make it. It's like I'm looking forward to those things happening rather than feeling the pressure of them.
Certainly. That pressure is obviously something so like you say, your pressure is to keep the business alive for the next 5 years. That's a pressure you had from day one of stepping into the role of MD of Omnicor. And I mean, if you thought, how do I keep the business alive for the next 5 years from day one, you've obviously long surpassed those 5 years. So, and we're still alive, we're still going. I mean, we would have a plan for what the next 5 years would be. But when you kind of feel those pressure, that sort of pressure, and where we are now, obviously, in terms of moving towards this remote sort of environment, how much extra pressure does it add that we don't know? So, I mean, let's say 5 years ago, when we included 2020 in a 5-year plan, obviously COVID was never in that 5-year plan. And now we know going forward 5 years is different to what we would have planned, because the shape of, not really the business, but the shape of assessments, for example, has changed. So things like remote assessments, things like proctoring, things like that are becoming a lot more the buzzwords around assessments. How much added pressure is that to now factor in things very last minute into, let's say, your longer term planning?
Yeah, I think those are interesting. I mean, we live in interesting times, and sure, I could not have predicted 10 years ago where our business would be now and what we would be doing. I see the trends in our world as being stuff that we do have to keep up with. It's part of the reason I like being an academic, because I see often that those trends have more style than substance. And, I like looking at, so like gamification, for example, has become a bit of a buzzword inside of assessment. And I've got a healthy skepticism around it. I believe it is going to change the way psychometrics gets done. But I'm also very interested in the psychometric properties that underlie gamification. And so far, I haven't seen robust research that it's doing anything different to normal assessment. So, I'm as intrigued as anyone of having sexy games that, are a lot of fun to play, but at the same time reveal a lot about a person. We're not there yet as a psychometric community, but I think we're moving in that direction. And, I'm sure in the next 5 years, there'll be a lot of stuff coming to the fore in that way. The world is moving fast. And I do feel some pressure to keep up with that world. I think our clients want it. I think we owe it to them as a service. So we are always looking at ways to make our products better. I mean, I believe in incremental change. I think they call it Kaizen, and I believe in that a lot. I believe if you're standing still as a business, you will die in 2 years. You have to be always pushing the envelope of what we're doing, but it's the part of the challenge of being a business that I absolutely love. I would not be a good person in a business in like a maintenance role. If they said to me, this is the way we're doing it, and this is the way you must continue to do it, I would die in that. I love always thinking about new things and how we're going to do them and just bringing them alive as a business. And, we've had enough of our own false starts. We've spent money on stuff that just hasn't flown, but it's been great to have those learnings and those failures as well. But one way or another, we have great systems that I think are the state of the art of the game, and that's just from continually plugging away and adding incremental improvement onto our systems and our ideas almost every single day.
So I have the next question ready for you, which is from Carly, who works in the OD team. Carly asked a lot of questions. We're going to try to get through them during the interview. But to start with, who would you say are your role models in business and why?
Sure. So that question, I really don't know how to answer. I mean, there's the obvious people who have just built amazing businesses. But like Steve Jobs is not a role model for me. Richard Branson is not a role model for me. I think I'm a little bit in awe of like anyone who understands a business better than I do. So, there's people who look at businesses and can look at the balance sheets and can see things through the eyes of an accountant or someone with an MBA that just sees the business as like a different shape than I see it. And I'm always envious of the people who have like doing acquisitions and really building businesses because they take risks and I don't have any names around that, but I'm like, in a way, I'm just envious of people who understand business in a different way than I do. So the way I understand business is very, very simple. Let's build great products. Let's not worry too much what our competitors are doing. I think we do have to keep an eye on that, but let's just follow our own instincts about what is good for us and let the market help shape what we're doing. And we get a lot of feedback from the market all the time. Our clients say to us, can you do this, add this, build that? And that, drives our business as much as the kind of think tanks that we have about what we should be doing. So I'm sorry, Carly, I don't have like a guru business leader who I follow. I've read lots of business books and I'm always impressed by leaders who have grown their businesses from nothing. But I think like from what I've read and really appreciated, it's like I model myself on business leaders who have low egos and strong people orientations. And I think that's the kind of stuff that I would want to aspire to be, is like someone who has a successful business but doesn't break people along the way, helps everybody grow. I would want nothing more than to share the wealth of our business with everyone who works at Omnicor.
So not Donald Trump then?
Not.
And so Donald Trump is the antithesis of my role model. I think he's one of the most flawed human beings on the planet. And, I don't think he should be in any leadership role anywhere. And, he's almost a benchmark for me on how not to be. He's very self-involved and narcissistic, and I believe in just being generous. And really, as I said before, is just like understanding that we're all humans and let's try our best what we can do as people. So I don't know if that answers it, Carly. It's a bit of a non-answer, but yeah.
So my next question is from your youngest daughter, Tara Rudnick. Yeah,
Oh.
no. So we
Right. Okay, I know her.
And her question is, what is your favorite book and who's it by?
Sure. I wish I'd had more time to think about these questions. So, I mean, I'm I'm a reader. I read lots of books. And, I've got a lot of insights from books. Probably in the last 20 years, I have read more non-fiction than fiction. And, certainly growing up, I read books that made like a massive impression on me just because the writing was so good and the stories were so vivid. I mean, authors like John Fowles come to mind. I love John Steinbeck and East of Eden. So I've always really loved good literature. English was one of the other things I studied at university, and I'm one of those people who loves poetry, and so I really like the soft sentiment in the world about I like people who reflect on the world and just make sense of it in their own way. And I found reading novels and poetry has really given me a great insight into, I guess, how other people see the world. I'm reading, so if I just look
if you
at
had
my
to pick
bookshelf
one,
at the moment, I'm reading a book by James Clear on habits and, how to, it's kind of an anti-goal book. It's a book around, how to build into your identity the things that you want to get out of life. So, he sees goals as very transactional, and that you meet a goal and it's a once-off, and he sees rather, to achieve things in life, make them part of your identity, not goals, but things that you do every day. So, I'm also looking at my bookshelf and I see I've got a great book on sleep and just how to sleep well, and I'm envious of people who sleep well because I don't really. And, just like, I guess books about health and how to stay healthy are interesting for me. So I read very, very widely. I have very eclectic tastes. I sometimes read books just because they're light and they're interesting, and other books I read because there's something to learn from them and some specific skill to learn. But, I can't think of anything at the moment that has transformed my life. I mean, one of the seminal books, and having said that, one of the seminal books I read probably at the 1990s was a book called The Turning Point by Fritjof Capra, and Fritjof Capra's book was around the connection between human systems, biological systems, in the way that we're all connected in this one big ecosystem. And that had a profound impact on my thinking. I read a lot of books in psychology and books on psychotherapy. So I think I have an appetite, really, on almost any book you read, you can learn something from it. But I hope that gives you a bit of an answer. But I think I'm still, work in progress in finding the definitive book. And, I think there'll always be a top 100 list rather than a top one book that I can single out.
The next question comes from Daniel Barnett. And he's asking, what is the most common personality trait that almost everyone has?
The most common personality trait? Yeah, trust Daniel to throw a curveball. Personality traits by definition are very diverse. But, I think the one thing that we look for as a marker in making recommendations around who should fit within a role is this thing called emotional stability. And emotional stability is a bit of a trait. I think it's a trait, certainly an attribute. And emotional stability is the extent towards which people can control their emotions. Now, the two polar opposites of this, you have on the one side, you would have people who are massively even-tempered. You could not tell if they're having the best day of their lives or in the midst of the worst crisis that they've experienced, because they're very even-tempered and the emotions are very contained. They are not near the surface. You couldn't look at them and really tell what's going on with them. On the other side of the scale, you have people whose emotions are very visible. They leak out. They can't contain anything. And you get different types of those things. You get the type of person whose emotions are very visible in the sense that they withdraw from the world and close themselves off and lock themselves in and, kind of go into themselves. And the other side is the people whose emotions leak out in a very volatile way. They scream and shout and they make a lot of noise. And somewhere along the spectrum of between those two extremes, everyone on the planet exists. And I think it's a very important attribute in that containing emotions is a big part of EQ. It's a big part of the way that we get on with other people and being able to moderate our responses and be emotionally in touch with who we are and what we should be doing that is appropriate at the time. So, of course, there are times where it's appropriate to get angry and to get hurt and to get wounded and maybe even to shout. But the extent to which we're in control of our emotions, we can make better decisions and we can navigate the world around us in a better way if we're in control of our emotional responses. And I think, for some people it's very difficult, for some people it's very easy, but it's definitely a hallmark of the people we want to work with. The people we want to work with are people who we want to be able to predict their emotions in good times and bad. And, not feel like we have to tiptoe, walk on eggshells around them because they're going to explode one day or get angry with us and withdraw, whatever it might be. So, Daniel, emotional stability is, it's a trait that, again, everybody has in some way or another. And it's one that I believe is a real good marker in understanding the people around us and the world around us, and definitely selects for good staff and good employees. Has Sully gone AWOL?
I think he's having a technical issue. But
Okay.
Maybe I can ask a question in the meantime, which is, really, what is the future of Omnicor?
So Omnicor's always dream big. And, we haven't always lived up to the big dreams, but, you have to be aiming somewhere and you've got to be aspiring for something. And definitely, we would want to, first of all, grow the business. We want more market share, and definitely we want more market share outside of South Africa. We believe that our products and our services are, we're told again and again by our clients what a great service we provide and how great our products are. And we know that they could stand up against, good products anywhere in the world. So definitely the future of Omnicor is not just contained in South Africa. We're going to grow the business. It's definitely at the forefront of innovation. One of the reasons why we have an IT team and we have a lot of resources just to continuous digital development is because that, there's no company today that I can think of that can survive without some level of bringing automation into the services, bringing digital technology into the services. So we're definitely going to continue to drive that. So it's definitely market expansion and it's systems development as well. We're going to, grow our human resources. There would probably in the future maybe be acquisitions that we make because we just want to grow as a business and increase our footprint, I think, in a way. So we always want to be at the forefront of technology in what we're doing. And we want the people who work at Omnicor to have jobs where they can push buttons and things will happen so that they can, rather being, completely like have so much admin to do that they can hardly breathe, that they can rather consult to businesses and provide expertise and good business intelligence through the technology that we have. So we're just going to, I guess it's, we're going to continue to grow in the way that we always have, but probably more aggressively into expanding our market share.
That sounds like a long to-do list for 2021.
Yeah. Oh, was it just for 2021?
No.
Okay.
So this question is also quite a challenging question, I think, and it's from your other daughter, Mira Rudnick. And the question is, do psychologists make for better parents?
Yeah, so I don't know the answer to that because I really only know myself as a parent, and I definitely know that I could have done better as a parent in many, many ways. I think on the surface, the answer to that question is psychologists have good insight into human behavior. We study human development. We know a lot about our children growing up and the theory of how they're doing. But, parenting is much more than that kind of information. Parenting is around closeness with your children, that your children can trust you, that they can be open with you, that you spend time with them. And, I think that there's many people in the world who have got not haven't read a single book about psychology who are naturally good at those things. So I would doubt that psychologists make better parents, but I think psychologically in tune parents with no academic qualifications in psychology, who are psychologically connected to their children, would probably make better parents. And an apology to Mira. I know I should have done better, and I will continue to strive in that direction. And, Mira is studying herself to be a psychologist, and she's never been afraid to give me lessons in parenting. And I'm sure they'll become increasingly refined. And I'm sure I've got a lot to learn from her. I already have.
That's a great question. Sorry, I had a few technical challenges. I'm back now.
Thanks.
The next question that I have is, how do you motivate people? So how do you motivate the people in Omnicor, the people around you?
Yeah, I don't know. And I don't know that I'm particularly good at that or actually do a lot of that. I think I encourage people to push through challenges, to find their best self. I'm always happy to give people feedback. I'm probably a little shy sometimes to give negative feedback, but that's part of that goes with the job of being a manager. And I like it when people open their hearts and listen to the feedback that you have. I struggle more, I think, with defensive people who, will make an argument about any feedback that you have. So, I think I'm good at motivating people who are open to trying hard, to people who can look inside themselves and find the resources that they need. And, I'm always willing to do my best. I mean, I try and make it not be too cheesy. I definitely not one of those advocates who, you can make anything happen if you just believe it. I think, I don't believe in like, that book, The Secret, that if you just dream it into existence, if you believe it enough, I think you've got to work hard to make things happen. And, I think I trust again, and I believe that people have the resource to do it. So when I'm motivating them, I guess I'm motivating them to go and find their best selves and make it happen. I don't think there's anything special that I'm doing except saying, you've got it in you. Go try hard, see what you can do. I'll do the best to support you.
That was from Daniel Barnett again, that question. Daniel Barnett.
From Daniel Barnett. Can we have no more questions from Daniel at this stage,
Shame.
please?
Okay. Well, we've already come to the end of the episode.
Oh, great.
And just maybe some final thoughts and comments.
So, first of all, thank you for inviting me onto this podcast. I'm humbled that I was considered as a guest. I really do thank everybody for putting energy into asking those questions, my children, and yes, to you, Daniel. Thanks for your questions, and really everyone at Omnicor who provided questions. It's been great to talk about those things. And, maybe just as a last thought, to just say thank you to everybody who contributes to making us come to work every day such a joy. And, I hope we continue for many years. We know that hope is not a strategy, so you've got to work hard to make it happen. And I appreciate all the energy that goes into just making Omnicor such a special place to work. And may we all continue to flourish together.
Thank you. Anything from your side, Silly?
Firstly, just my apologies. It wouldn't be 2020 if there was no technical challenges in these sort of sessions. I think thank you to both yourself, Colleen, and Dr. Rudnick for having me and for getting the chance to question Hilton about some of these questions. But I think also just to Hilton, I think just keep doing what you do. I speak to you every day, all the time, and I think what you do is you do it really well. And the one thing that we never got to touch on that I think you should always keep is just your lightheartedness and your sense of humor. That's what keeps me motivated all the time. Is I know Hilton and I have a joke about it somewhere, so always keep that up.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah, we do. I think it's a nice part of just our culture is that we try to keep it light. We don't use big sticks. We use lots of soft conversations. It's an offense at Omnicor to ever shout at anybody. And So, and Sully, you're really part of the culture that helps me keep it light, and we always have a joke, and it just makes, being at work so fun. And it's also just been great, at Omnicor. I don't know if, I work with Colleen very, 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 very closely. And, it's so good just to have people who always got the best interests of the business at heart and are always sending ideas to help us make it a better business. So it's been, it feels like I'm the one who's really privileged to be working with everybody at Omnicor rather than the other way around.
Great. Well, that's a nice place to put a full stop there. And it was wonderful having you as a guest today, Hilton. And thanks, Sully, being the co-host chair. I might ask you in the future also if you enjoyed it, and wishing you all a wonderful rest over the holidays and a good 2021. Certainly.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for listening all the way to the end. We really hope you enjoyed the episode. It would help us a lot if you subscribe to our podcast on iTunes and Apple Podcasts. Give us 5 stars if possible, and check out our website www.omnicor.co.za. You'll find our previous episodes and other blogs and helpful resources. And we look forward to connecting in the next episode.